The Alhambra. The Alhambra. A palace that the genies have gilded like a dream and filled with harmony. A fortress of festooned and crumbling battlements, where enchanting syllables may be heard at night when the moon, through 1,000 Arabian arches, scatters white trefoils across the walls. When we read these lines by Victor Hugo, we imagine the poet gazing in rapture at the beauty of the Alhambra. But in fact, he never went to Granada. In this passage from Les Orientales, it's his poetic imagination that is at work at a time when Orientalism, made fashionable by the paintings of Delacroix, was reinventing a long-forgotten civilization. For the Romantics, this combination of the Golden Age of Islam with the vestiges of the Golden Age of Spain represented an ideal, and the Alhambra became the mythical palace of their fantasies, of their desires, of their paradise losts. Writers, painters, sculptors, musicians, the artists of the 19th century all dreamed of basking in this oasis of happiness. When Manuel de Falla composed Nights in the Gardens of Spain, it hardly mattered that he too had never been to Granada, for the Alhambra inhabited his imagination. And so, the history of the palace has always been accompanied by music and musicians in its minor intrigues and its major events, in times of harmony as well as of dissonance. And those melodies which still resonate within its walls reveal, if we listen to them, the different layers that have contributed to the making of its legend. The Alhambra is an invitation to a voyage. And as Baudelaire, who was fascinated by the splendors of the East, wrote, "There all is order and beauty, pleasure, calm and sensual delight." The Alhambra was originally a fortress, an alcazaba, one of the many to be found throughout Andalusia in the 8th century. It was here that the Umayyads had settled after fleeing Baghdad. In the 11th century, Granada became an independent kingdom. It was ruled by a succession of different Muslim dynasties. They set about enlarging the original fortress, building towers, adding a castle. Seen from below, with its red walls rising up over the town, it was an impressive sight. Its nickname became Alhambra, Alhambra meaning red. It inspired fear as well as fascination. 600 years later, fear and fascination would be woven into the music of Manuel de Falla's El Amor Brujo, a ballet set in the village of Andalusia. For the Andalusian pianist Javier Pirianes, performing it in the courtyard of the Myrtles is a way of continuing the story. The sultans of Granada showed a sense of openness, and the Alhambra soon became a cultural crossroads. Meaningful exchanges took place between the three religions in an atmosphere of relative tolerance. Their coexistence, though often idealized today, has come to symbolize a vision of intercultural harmony, which also seems to be reflected in the decorative motifs. In general, except for a few violent episodes, the Muslims showed tolerance towards the Jews and the Christians. Recognizing the fact that they all had the same God, they called them the people of the book. The Jews, in particular, were able to hold some of the highest positions in society: doctors, astrologers, philosophers, even Grand Vizier of the Alhambra. Spanish Jewish hymns were combined with Arab Andalusian chants. Religious tensions began to mount in the 11th century. Christian Europe embarked on a series of deadly crusades. The Almohad dynasty turned to an Islam without books, music, or philosophy. While the people of different faiths were slaughtering each other, the Alhambra still strove to maintain peace with the neighboring kingdoms. In the 13th century, the emirates in Spain fell, one after another, to Christian rule. Muhammad ibn Nasir, who established the Nasrid dynasty, offered his support to Ferdinand III, who was eager to get his hands on Seville. Nasir agreed to recognize the Catholic king as his overlord in return for a guarantee of peace. So Granada held out as the last Muslim kingdom in Spain, and Ferdinand III proudly dubbed himself the King of the Three Religions. When Muhammad ibn Nasir arrived at the Alhambra, he was acclaimed by the people of Granada, who are said to have declared, "There is no victor but God." The Nasrids adopted this as their motto, which conferred a sense of sacredness to the Sultan. In the centuries that followed, they would build the Alhambra's magnificent palaces, design its gardens, and transform what was originally a fortress into an oasis of elegance and beauty. As a way of enhancing their status and consolidating their power, the Nasrids' aim was, even back then, to turn the Alhambra into a monument of prestige. They inscribed their motto across its walls. Every panel of stucco, wood, or ceramic tiling was lavishly decorated and embellished with poems, stories, and notations written in stylized calligraphies. The Alhambra became a monumental book to the glory of the Nasrids that praised the virtues and incomparable splendor of the palaces. "The portico is so beautiful that the palace competes in beauty with the sky," proclaims the poem inscribed in the Hall of the Two Sisters. The world of the sultans was very exclusive. Only the important figures of the day were allowed to enter into the Alhambra and admire its wonders. The palace was thus shrouded in mystery and fed all kinds of rumors amongst the people. The Alhambra was designed to represent paradise. It was a way for the Nasrid rulers to proclaim their divine ancestry. On earth, however, paradise would not be coming anytime soon. Relations between the different kingdoms in Spain continued to be precarious. 600 years later, the dance of terror from Manuel de Falla's El Amor Brujo seems to resonate with the fears of those times. King Ferdinand III was succeeded by his son Alfonso X. Known as Alfonso the Wise, he respected and earned the esteem of the Nasrids, who were at the height of their reign. He was a great scholar, a lover of the arts and sciences, and a composer of music. Many songs were written in his honor. Throughout the 14th century, the Nasrids continued to rule supreme over the emirate. Whenever any conflicts arose, they formed alliances with the Catholic kings in order to preserve their power. After interfamilial intrigues forced him into exile, one sultan recovered his throne with the help of his Spanish ally. To proclaim his absolute sovereignty, he built the Court of the Lions. The king of the animals is a symbol of royal power, and the fountain, with its 4 waterways, represents paradise, as it is described in the Quran. The patios and arabesques hark back to the golden age of Islam. The forest of columns resembles a palm grove, and the layout of the courtyard is reminiscent of a Benedictine cloister. What we see is an interweaving of religions and cultures. In Christian territory, the nobles employed Arab craftsmen for their skills in the decorative arts. At the Alhambra, there are fleurs-de-lis in the domes. In the 15th century, while the Nasrid dynasty was being torn apart by the infighting, the very Catholic monarchs Isabel of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon decided to join forces to turn their lands into an entirely Christian kingdom. This was the beginning of the downfall. The Spanish armies were advancing. The Reconquista was on its way. The Alhambra was surrounded. Was Manuel de Falla thinking of this deadly siege when he composed his ritual fire dance? Granada fell in 1492, the same year in which Columbus discovered America. This defeat also contributed to the legend. For the painters of the 19th century, who were particularly fond of historical scenes, this was the perfect subject. With its weeping victims, glorious conquerors, and fallen heroes on the road to exile. As the story goes, the Sultan's mother said to her son from the top of the tower, "You weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man." Granada's last Sultan, Boabdil, surrendered the keys of the Alhambra to the Catholic monarchs. He left the palace through the Gate of the Seven Floors and requested that it be sealed up forever afterwards. Muslim rule in Andalusia thus came to an end nearly 8 centuries after it had begun. The palaces did not remain empty for long. In spite of the promises made by the Spaniards, Muslims were forcibly converted to Catholicism and Jews were expelled from Spain. The reconquerors took over the Moorish palaces. The Great Mosque became the Church of Santa Maria de la Alhambra. With Charles V, the Alhambra entered into a new era. The emperor left the Nasrid palaces intact, but decided to build an imposing edifice in his own name, which would combine the style of the Italian Renaissance with the classical architecture of ancient Greece and Rome. Associating the past with the present is a way of asserting one's power, and the 2 lions he placed at the entrance to the new palace are bigger than the ones in the Court of the Lions. During his reign, Charles V proceeded to create his own legend. This edifice, which is part of it, would herald the beginning of Spain's golden age. While the Inquisition was sowing terror and oppression, Wealth was flowing in from the New World, and Spanish literature and the arts were flourishing. The walls, columns, and galleries of the new palace reflected the image of gentle refinement that the royalty sought to maintain. In the arts, the Renaissance was coming to an end, while the Baroque was on the rise. In music, it was the spirit of the Counter-Reformation that influenced composers, such as Juan Vasquez, whom we hear here. Folk music was born out in the streets in the area surrounding the palaces. Many years later, it would inspire the composer Isaac Albeniz. In a piece called El Albaicin, after the oldest neighborhood in Granada, he uses the rhythms of its songs and dances, while the choppy notes on the piano imitate the plucking of a guitar. Classical music has always drawn its inspiration from folk culture. In the 17th century, a new musical genre made its appearance: satirical burlesque skits called jacaras, which featured characters taken from the underworld and the world of prostitution. During the Reconquista, the Gypsy community settled in a neighborhood next to El Albaicin, known as Sacramonte. Poor, rejected, mistreated, the Gypsies expressed their pain and misfortunes through their songs and dances. But they also exerted a certain fascination, and over the centuries, a picturesque image of their culture developed. Cervantes portrays it in a positive light in The Little Gypsy Girl, written in 1613. Gypsy songs would soon be mixed with traditional Andalusian music to create flamenco, which, as time went by, would also become part of the lore surrounding the Alhambra. Flamenco would gradually make its way out of the poor neighborhoods and gain respectability. Andalusia would come to embrace it as a symbol of its identity. For the poet Federico Garcia Lorca, the gypsy is the highest, the most aristocratic representative of my land, as well as the guardian of the embers, the blood, and the alphabet of the Andalusian and universal truth. When Orientalism became popular in the 19th century, artists were looking for mystery, fantasy, and escape. The faraway lands of the East inspired both fear and fascination. As a gateway to the Arabian world, Spain soon drew the interest of other writers, painters, and musicians. The Alhambra was the ideal palace. It embodied all of their fantasies and their aspirations, with its Nasrid artwork, the coexistence of the religions, the Renaissance of Charles V, the Spanish monarchs, the Golden Age. It fueled the artist's imagination and gave rise to a very specific trend, Alhambrism. A different Alhambra came into being in their minds, another palace that was even more grandiose than the real one. In their engravings, perspective was distorted and dimensions were exaggerated. In their writings, tales and legends were embellished. Their paintings glorified a Muslim civilization of the past, with a lavish display of riches and women, of grandeur and opulence. The fantasized sensuality of Arabian women was enticing to a Western imagination frustrated by the Puritan ethics of the 19th century. The Alhambra became the foundation for a collective vision. In 1915, Manuel de Falla visited the Alhambra for the first time with the writer Maria Martina Sierra, who wrote, "When we came to the gates of what was once a palace and a fortress, I said to my fellow pilgrim, 'Give me your hand, close your eyes, and don't open them until I tell you to.' I led him quickly through the courtyard of the myrtles, beneath whose waters lies a sleeping heart, through the hall of the boat, through the prodigious Comaris Hall, whose ceiling imitates a starry sky. I led him to the central window. 'Look,' I said, releasing my companion's hand, and he opened his eyes. In 1921, the composer moved into this little house not far from the Alhambra. Here, in this simple, rather austere environment, he would live like an ascetic, devoting himself entirely to his music until his death. When you can't afford to travel, you have to make up for it through your imagination, said Claude Debussy, who composed his Estampes without ever going to Granada. Like Debussy, everyone dreamed of these fragrant gardens, of these marvelous palaces, of these fountains created by the Nazarides as symbols of eternal life. The ceiling of the ambassador's hall, which represents the seven heavens of Islam, conferred divine authority upon the sultans in the eyes of their visitors. Western travelers who came here in the 19th century imagined in this very same room a meeting between Christopher Columbus and Queen Isabella that never took place in Granada. The Alhambra is full of legends. It stirs the imagination. Poets have continued to celebrate it, like Francisco Villespesa. Though the shadows of these walls have long since gone, he wrote, the memory of them will live on as the final refuge of dreams and art. And then the last nightingale to breathe on this earth will build its nest and sing its farewell song among the glorious ruins of the Alhambra. A myth of the splendors of the past, a dream of harmony among cultures, a sense of eternity. Everyone projects their own desires on the Alhambra.